Hello, everybody, and welcome into the Sportscaster and Her Son, where sports bridges the gap between the generations. We are on episode 101, and we are going to continue talking about the Bears season. I'm Peggy Kusinski, a longtime Bears reporter in Chicago. I host the Bears PostGame shows on the Chicago Bears radio network, the flagship home, ESPN 1000 in Chicago. I'm the mom. I'm one of the sportscasters, and I'm from the the older generation. Hi, Jason.
Hi, Mom. Good to talk to you. I'm from the younger generation, if you couldn't tell by looking at your screen. I'm with 13 News here in Topeka, Kansas, based out of Manhattan, doing news and sports, covering all things K-State and prep sports in the area. Having a blast doing it, but also having a lot of fun watching and following along with the Chicago Bears, picking up their first win of the season in the season opener on Sunday. Mom, it wasn't pretty, but they got the win, and that's all that matters.
Exactly, Jason. They come away with a 24-17 win. They extend their home win streak from last season, where they finished the season strong. They now have 6 straight wins on at home, but they go on the road, Sunday Night Football, Houston, to play the quarterback that everybody is comparing Caleb Williams' debut and season as a rookie to, and that is last year's phenomenal rookie, C.J. Stroud. This is not going to be easy.
No, Mom, this isn't going to be easy at all. The Houston Texans are one of the best teams in the NFL. They've built this thing from the ground up with a strong defense and even better offense. Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs are 2 of the better wide receivers in the NFL. And as you mentioned, C.J. Stroud, can't mention the Texans without mentioning him. He has just been fantastic as the Texans quarterback, now entering year 2, put up record numbers in his rookie year last season. Everything that Caleb Williams does this year will be compared to what C.J. Stroud did last year. And so this game, the timing of this game is really interesting because, yes, the Bears won their week 1 season opener, but Caleb didn't look great. And there are probably more question marks after the game than there were before the game. And so now we get to see Caleb Williams face off against a guy who he is compared to, will always be compared to, for whatever reason. And it should be a good game. The Bears are going to be underdogs in this one. Houston's a good team, like you said, primetime environment. But the Bears' defense was the big story on Sunday. And I think, Mom, that if the Bears' defense shows up again on Sunday night, they're at least going to be in this game down the stretch. They should be in every game this year if the defense looks how they did against the Titans.
Yeah, it took them a while to adjust. And I think that what we saw in the first half was some sloppy defense. They were not being very gap-centric. They were letting Tony Pollard do whatever he wanted. And I think the defense was also getting a little thrown off by the off-balance setup that the offensive line of the Titans was doing. And they were having their way. I like. What's interesting, though, is that Matt Eberflus didn't think it was so much the adjustments that they made. It was really guys just coming out and playing smart and playing in control of their own responsibilities. So I thought that was great. I think that if the defense can play both halves that way, you're right. The defense is going to win a lot of games for the Bears this year. Last week, special teams. My goodness. Special teams for the Bears. Now, and coming away with a block of a punt and a return for a touchdown was unbelievable.
Absolutely unbelievable. And the last time they did that was against the Tennessee Titans in 2012. It was Corey Wooten with the block punt and Brian Urlacher with the pick 6. And so things are a little different now. Urlacher's in the Hall of Fame and Corey Wooten is talking about the Bears for a living. And so it's pretty cool seeing the Bears do that against the Titans. But everybody's minds are now on that game this weekend against Houston. Should be a great test. I mean, this is one of the better teams that they'll face in the early part of their schedule, arguably the best team who they will face in the early part of their schedule. And it's primetime football. Everyone's excited about this. Week 2, Sunday night, 2 1-0 teams, 2 great young quarterbacks. I think Caleb's going to really show something on Sunday. I think that the Bears are going to simplify the offense for him, get him a little bit more momentum going in that first half, a little bit more downfield throws, getting guys open. I'd like to see less stuff in the flat and less putting him in those situations where he twirls his way into 20-yard lost sacks.
Hey, let's bring in our special guest, Courtney Cronin from ESPN, one of my colleagues at ESPN Radio in Chicago. And you all know her from ESPN's NFL Nation, the Chicago Bears podcast. Courtney, is there anything you are not doing these days? My goodness.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm Jason. I finally get to meet you. I've met Shay before, so I've met like one half of you guys. But thank you so much for having me. This is a treat.
It's a treat for us, Courtney. We were just breaking down the Bears week 1, which I know everyone's talking about this week. Let's talk about Caleb Williams. And, we've talked about this ad nauseum, that everyone's going to have to temper their enthusiasm a little bit and know that there are going to be ups and downs. There were so many little things that really did seem to add up to be big things, especially in the first half. How much improvement can we expect just on a weekly basis?
I think you've got to look at it from the overall body of work and why the offense looked so stagnant. And you get 93 passing yards from a quarterback who in moments looked like he had everything under control in the preseason. You just didn't see that. I think we all expected there to be lumps. Nobody expected it to look that bad. So the root of it is a couple of different things. I think first and foremost, you look at the offensive line and realize that in moments where Caleb has told us, I'm looking to pass when I'm in these situations. I'm not looking to take off and run if I don't see anything initially downfield. It felt like the offensive line might have reverted back, at least in mindset wise, to how they would have approached that with Justin Fields as their quarterback versus somebody who, even in the scramble drill, will be looking to continue to throw down the field. There's that. There's the fact that there really wasn't much run support. Caleb and his receivers were not on the same page, which is, such a ballyhooed unit. You'd expect that to be a little bit more polished than it looked, because we had heard and seen all preseason long about how good that connection was. I think I chalk a lot of it up to, hey, this is the first game for a rookie quarterback. And usually any of these quarterbacks drafted number 1 overall, whether it's Bryce Young to Baker Mayfield to anybody in between and before that, they struggle. And the situation is different for Caleb because he gets bailed out by a really good defense and a solid special teams unit that these other high draft picks don't typically have. So while there's a ton to clean up, I don't think that anybody's freaking out yet or should freak out about the state of the Bears offense unless this becomes some sort of uncharacteristic trend. Shane Waldron, I mean, you can look no further than the fact that the top 3 receivers, DeAndre Swift and Cole Kmet, were only on the field for 10 snaps together. I think that he's working through some of these early season, trying to figure out what the best usage is going to be for these players, his top skill players within the different personnel groupings that he wants to deploy. So it's sounds simple to say, hey, it's week 1, everybody calm down. But at least within the grand scheme of things, this is why the Bears were built to bring in a rookie quarterback drafted number 1 overall into a situation that doesn't feel like everything is his responsibility. He has time now to grow with this defense, being able to shoulder the load for however long in the early portion of the season they have to.
I think there's some positives as well. I was looking at CJ Stroud's first game last year.
Wasn't good.
No, it wasn't good. I think he threw a couple of picks. The one thing that you can look at, Caleb took care of the football. Now, terrible decision where they could not convert 2nd and 1 and ended up in 3rd and 19 when he tried to avoid a sack and rolled out and did a lot of his USC stuff. That's the stuff he's going to learn that he can't let happen. But otherwise, he took care of the football. He didn't throw the football, into their hands. He saw everything. It was just his timing that was off. He was behind his receivers. He was ahead of his receivers. So that he recognized things. Now it's just a matter of him, not the game slowing down, but him slowing things down as well.
And I know what he said, that he doesn't get nervous for games or anything. I would venture to guess that he might have had his internal clock sped up a little bit faster than he was hoping to have had it during his first game, because, Tavondre Sweat is a big dude. Jeffrey Simmons is a game wrecker. Those are people that when they're going full speed, it's not the preseason anymore. This is real, and you're going to have to be able to, compensate for all of that in what you're doing, getting rid of the ball much faster than he has been. I mean, that's something, if there's any bugaboo for Caleb Williams coming in as the number 1 overall pick, it's that he held onto the ball too long at USC. Now, when you're able to make these Houdini-esque moves and get away from pressure and get away from defenders trying to tackle you, you can get away with holding the ball a little bit longer. Patrick Mahomes does it all the time because he can buy time to like fling it and find his guys down the field. But I think for Caleb, it's just like the anticipation of what this game was and what it was stacked up to be. Like, you sometimes see guys like, are you trying to play to a level to, match the hype that comes in? Or are you trying to play football? Like, there are moments within that I think, not saying that like he was concerned about outside noise, but there was a lot at stake for him because of what was being, he's put in the best situation of any quarterback we've ever seen in the last 30 years drafted in his position. He's got a team that's filled with skill players that are super talented, and they built this team for him. He had to match that. And I do think in moments there were times where he pressed, which is why you saw the overthrows on some of those throws, but also like he threw a perfect ball to Keenan Allen that was dropped at the goal line. There were situations where I didn't feel like they had enough run support for a rookie quarterback. Like, not all of it's on him, but he will ultimately be judged on how different it looks going from week 1 down to Houston in week 2.
Yeah.
Lights are only going to get brighter, though, this weekend. Like, they're playing in Houston, primetime, big game against CJ Stroud. Mom, like we just talked about, the guy who Caleb will always be compared to, at least this season. Like, that's the standard for his rookie year. What are the Bears going to do this week to make things easier on him? And on Sunday, the first few drives will be scripted. Like, what are they going to do to make things easier on him so that internal clock isn't moving too fast?
Yeah, I mean, right after the Sunday night game ended between the Lions and the Rams, the first thing you see is that graphic, CJ Stroud versus Caleb Williams. Those two, because of how much success that CJ Stroud had as a rookie, which is probably an unfair bar to set for all other rookies, Caleb's going to be compared to that from here on out, and seeing how quickly he can rise to that level. Well, CJ Stroud wasn't CJ Stroud until, I'd say week 3, his rookie season was his first good game. But even then, he wasn't the guy that we, attribute to having the best rookie season ever until like midway through the season. So Caleb, and what the Bears can do for Caleb going into a hostile environment down in Houston, it's on the road, it's a night game. It's going to be his first test of what it's like to play on somebody else's turf where they have a good defense. They brought in some pass rushers this offseason. They're going to be trying to get after him. I think first and foremost, that the number one thing is you got to be able to take some of that pressure off of him. When they say lean on the skill around you, that skill should be DeAndre Swift. That skill should be the run game first and foremost, because it just felt non-existent. Caleb was their, biggest threat in the run when he had that 11-yard scramble in the third quarter. Before that, it just didn't feel like there was much. So I think you start there. I also would like to believe that the receivers in Caleb aren't going to look as disjointed as they did this past week. I think some of that was due to injury. Like, we don't know what DJ Moore is playing through because he didn't talk after the game. Matt Eberflus didn't have any sort of update on his status following his Monday press conference, but we do know that he left the game for probably about like 10 minutes in that first half, and it just felt like he wasn't the same guy when he went back out there. And same thing with Keenan Allen. So it's going to be tough to like kind of put all of that behind you and be like, all right, well, where do we pick up here? Like, but they also know that they've built that chemistry and they can lean in on that chemistry the way that they had throughout training camp. You just got to find an easier way to scheme up some throws for Caleb that can get him in a rhythm and get him moving the ball downfield much more efficiently than he did early on last week.
I saw a tweet on Sunday. Somebody said that the Bears win reminded them of 2006. And now I don't think 2006 is what anybody wants this team to be other than the outcome of that season.
Sure.
But the most infamous in a grand scheme of things, but famous in Chicago game from that season would be the primetime game in Arizona. The Bears are who we thought they were. Is that the kind of game that we're going to need this Sunday for the Bears to win? Or do you think that the offense is going to step up a little more and we're going to see more of the number 1 overall pick, Caleb Williams?
Oh man, I don't know. They don't have a Devin Hester on this team. As good as DeAndre Carter was on that 66-yard kickoff return, they don't have somebody who can break open the game the way that Hester did in that second half against the Monday night game in Arizona. But I think, Jason, it's okay for them to lean on the defense the way that they had in week 1, the first quarter of the season. That's like how this team was built, to not have it all fall on Caleb Williams, where he doesn't have to score 21 or 28 points a game with his arm, that this group can help him through some of those early season lumps. And if you think about it, they almost had they should have had 4 interceptions. There was one that like just flew right by Tyreek Stevenson. Like, I don't know how that ball did not end up in his hands, but it didn't. And then Jalen Johnson almost had another one. Both of them come through with interceptions. It's the Tyreek Stevenson play that gives the Bears the go ahead score after clawing back from a 17-3 deficit. Nobody wants it to look like that again. In back-to-back weeks, there will certainly be a lot of noise about the offense if it looks like that again. But you can, the way that they pressured Will Levis, I mean, it's going to look different because talent discrepancy, much different quarterback in Houston than there is in Tennessee. But God, the way that they pressured Tennessee and the extra added pressure that Matt Eberflus brought in the most critical moment that led to the play that broke the game open completely for the Bears, I think it's okay to carry that same sort of mindset that, hey, offense, whatever it is you're working through, whatever it is you're trying to figure out, keep going with it. We've got you in these moments. And same thing with special teams too. I know that Tyreek Stevenson said that they knew they were going to block that punt all week. I don't know how you could have that sort of premonition, but if there are ways to practice it and do whatever they did in that third quarter to break the game open in that moment that kind of spurred some of those momentum plays, I guess keep doing that.
Yeah, they saw something in that punt coverage and the way that the kicker, I don't know what they saw, but I did hear them talking a little bit more about that. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. That's some good film breakdown.
Yeah.
But I want to go back to exactly what you were just saying, because you're exactly right. It was the pressure on the quarterback, on Will Levis, that allowed the back end to pick off Will Levis like they did. And all offseason, we wondered whether the Bears had enough defensive pressure up front, complimenting Montez Sweat. We didn't even mention Montez Sweat in the post game, during the game. I mean, it was DeMarcus Walker getting pressure. Daryl, are you kidding me? Daryl Taylor, the guy they just pick up a week ago, comes in and ends up with 2 sacks. I love what they were doing. They were getting pressure inside from second-year player Jervon Dexter. They were moving guys around the line. And something, Courtney, that Yurko and I talked about on the postgame that we had not seen before, but they were really playing a very spread line on the defensive line. They spread their ends out so wide that at first it really bothered Yurko because it left so many gaps open. But at the same time, they were getting to the quarterback.
Yeah, I think that's what Matt Eberflus, I think back to when Daryl Taylor was traded here, and they talk about playing the 9s and the 5s, and that 9 technique that I think is what you're referring to there. It worked. And I don't know if this means that this is the end all, be all with the defensive line, that they won't have to trade for anybody, because that was our concern going in. Will they be able to generate enough pressure on opposing quarterbacks to be okay with this unit the way it is and not have to go sign somebody before the trade deadline? And there's a lot of time to figure out if this unit is the right unit. But Daryl Taylor coming in and right away, what did he finish? 2.5 sacks on Sunday? That's a pretty nice debut for somebody who just got here and is just starting to get worked into this rotation. But Andrew Billings was in the backfield quite a bit, putting a lot of pressure. And sometimes that pressure doesn't have to just yield sacks. It's getting the quarterback off his spot, getting him uncomfortable, that puts an offense at a disadvantage. So if you can do that, if you can move DeMarcus Walker inside, which they kicked him inside on several earlier downs too, not just on third down, I thought that was a smart game plan, and one that they could try to replicate here going into Houston from the Tennessee game, because as long as you can if you can dent the pocket, which is something Matt Eberflus always talks about, being able to keep a quarterback high and have that interior push, you're going to allow your ends to have a better chance at getting home. And that's the key to, any successful pass rush, but certainly also knowing when to dial up pressure. We've seen Matt Eberflus get pretty aggressive, even though he wasn't calling all the defense in the preseason, it's still his unit. And I don't think he's going to let Eric Washington call something that probably wouldn't be replicated in a real game. I think that that's a sign that's, probably more of that to come. I mean, hell, it came on the 3rd and 7 play that resulted in Will Levis getting hit and then, throwing the ball, flicking the ball to the sideline. That was because of a blitz call that Matt Eberflus dialed up, and that was the right one. So I would expect to see more of that, getting pressure with their standard pass rush and also trying to, bring in added guys when they need to.
One other question offensively, because you've been covering the team this week as well. The little surprise to find out about Rome Odunze having an MRI. What's the latest on him? And is there reason to be concerned now having 2 wide receivers? Kind of 2.5, because Keenan Allen's been having that heel issue and they kept calling it a cleat issue throughout training camp. But to have your 3 starting wide receivers all having some kind of questionable issues going into week 2, is that reason to be concerned?
I think so. I think anytime, because we don't know, again, with like DJ Moore, he left the game for about 10 minutes. He was in the medical tent. And I don't think he looked like the same player coming back in afterwards. Now, could that have just been a byproduct of the offense was in a rut? Nobody was nobody was able to get anything done potentially, but we'll see if he shows up on the injury report, if Keenan Allen's still dealing with a heel. I don't think his heel caused him to drop the ball at the goal line, but he's not going to be happy with 2.4 yards, 2.4 yard average per target. That's the second lowest of his career that he had last week. So the Rome Odunze one's interesting because there's certain things that you don't pick up on necessarily in the moment in a game. And how could you? Because he stayed in for one more play and then he went to the sideline. It's not like they had to call an injury timeout. There was no injury designation given, I think, for anybody in this game, even for DJ Moore. As long as he was out, it wasn't like, hey, he's questionable to come back in. It was just 10 minutes in the injury tent, more or less, and then he came back. Week to week, the way it's being described for a sprained MCL for Rome Odunze, I don't think that's a good sign that about his availability, certainly for this game, but for the next couple games. They're going to monitor it. It's great that they're not already putting him on IR, but for somebody who's supposed to be a pretty big part of the passing game, only had 1 catch in his debut. You want to see more from him. You just don't want him to get so far behind the 8 ball or be working through something all season long that ends up kind of stunting his development.
Aside from a win on Sunday, what is progress? I think that expectations for this game are a little different after how the Bears looked this past Sunday. So what do you think progress is if they aren't able to pull out a win?
You got to see that passing game look a little bit more it looks like it has a little bit more of a pulse than it did in week 1. And, for Caleb, that's, averaging more than 3.2 yards per attempt. Just try to get the ball moving downfield. And some of that can be manufactured yards, an extension of the run game. What did we see throughout the preseason? Tossing the ball to DeAndre Swift, using your running backs in the screen game. I mean, the only screen that really sticks out to me is that one that was thrown to Gerald Everett in the first half, and that was right after the sack. And it's all right, well, where's this going? I understand it was 3rd and 29. It's not like you have a lot of plays for, when you're that far behind the sticks, but seeing more of that, honestly, trying to find what made them look like they were going to be a good offense and still could be a very good offense in the preseason, trying to see if that can be generated in a regular season game and having Caleb settle in too. I don't think when he was dreaming up his NFL debut for, as much as he says, I don't care about stats or anything else, he probably would have liked to have thrown a touchdown, whether, seeing that would probably be a good thing for his second game in the NFL, just to take some of the pressure off this offense just from the outside of, oh my God, what's happening to this group? We thought it was going to be so much better. It's number 1 overall pick. The expectations with him are unlike anything we've ever seen. And I'm not saying he has to live up to somebody else's expectation when he probably has pretty immense ones on himself, but you got to make this unit look I don't even know if anemic's the right word. I feel like it's just that it was just lifeless in the first game.
Yeah.
Last question for me. Hold on, Mom. Super quick. So many of the Bears' big dogs didn't step up on Sunday, and they still won. Who's one player who was silent this past Sunday who needs to have a big game in order for the Bears to at least be competitive in the fourth quarter of this one?
I'll say DeAndre Swift because he was, 3 yards a carry. I think he totaled 30 by the time it was over, on 10 carries. That's just not enough. And Yeah, you don't want to run up the gut into Jeffrey Simmons, but so some of that's on him, some of that I'm sure is on play design, but I think that they've got to have a little bit more run support for their rookie quarterback this week, starting with their number one back.
I think that we saw when they started picking up more running yards, they brought in Mercedes Lewis, and he came in blocking, and then it started opening things up. But Courtney, man, that offensive line had some problems last week. From Coleman Shelton at center, Tevin Jenkins looked like he was learning how to dance out there, and they started rotating. They said it was part of the plan to rotate Nate Davis at right guard. I find that kind of shocking going into week one if it's not out of necessity. Are there more problems on the offensive line than Ryan Poles thought, calling it his deepest offensive line he's ever had?
Yeah, I mean, it's like what they're saying is not matching up with their actions, which is not great. Nobody ever wants a rotation. That doesn't make any sense. Like that would be if they try to justify it as, we have a good competition there. That competition is supposed to happen in training camp, not in the middle of like the season. So they need to figure that one out and figure it out quickly because you can't afford to be doing this 4 or 5 weeks into the season. But it shows you, like, if Nate Davis was everything they wanted him to be, they wouldn't have this planned rotation at right guard. And it's not injury related. It's not any of that. He wasn't on the injury report. So that's just like nonsensical. They don't think he's good enough right now to like give him that job outright. So that's why they're trying to work Ryan Bates in. If they felt that Nate Davis was a solid bet, then you don't mess with the offensive line. You just have Ryan Bates be like, sorry, injuries happened. Like you're dealing with the shoulder. Like you're just a backup for right now. And you work on that behind the scenes at practice, not letting it play out in the middle of a game. But Bates missed all of their preseason games, so he hasn't had those reps at game speed. You can continue this on for like a week, maybe 2, but by then they've got to figure out who their starting right guard is because you can't continue this charade and say, oh, well, it's just because we have such great competition. You let results speak for themselves, not like, okay, well, you need to give this guy this many snaps and this guy this many snaps. Like we saw that last year when they were rotating out of necessity, like you mentioned, Peggy, like centers. Like that's not something that they want to have to do with any part of the offensive line.
All right, finally, before we let you go here, Courtney, the Bears have talked about a fast start. They get the first win, not exactly as they were expecting to get it, but they did. If they can come out of this first month at 2-2, that's considered a success. Starting fast, lower the expectations for Caleb Williams. What else do they need to do to get through the first month of the season?
I think they just got to settle in. I mean, this is the part of your schedule. If you really think you're a playoff team that you got to capitalize on. So coming out 2-2 at the very worst, 3-1, probably what you're eyeing, that has to be the goal because you have 2 second-year quarterbacks. You have had 3 second-year quarterbacks the first 3 weeks of the season, and you have Matthew Stafford coming to town with the Los Angeles Rams, a very injured Los Angeles Rams that maybe by that point, I mean, doesn't seem like we're going to see Puka Nacua in that game. I think, we won't because he went to IR. If there's a way to like try to steal a win there against a team that you should not be favored against, then do it. But I think this defense is on the right track. It's about how long can they hold up like their end of the bargain and carry the weight for this offense as they try to work things out. That's going to be the storyline this first month of the season, and what the record is and what's reflected of that at the end is going to ultimately tell us, okay, is this team on the track towards the playoffs after the first month, or do we have too many questions that just don't have answers?
Yeah. Courtney, you're the best. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Girlfriend, you just never cease to amaze me. It's just you're always on. You're the hardest working reporter in sports, and we love you for that. Thank you.
Thank you guys for having me. And Jason, good luck with your new job. I'm so excited to see all the things that you do at the very onset of your career. So I have had a wonderful time. Thank you both. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Courtney. Take care.
Thanks.
Keep up the great work.
Courtney Cronin from ESPN, NFL Nation, and ESPN 1000 in Chicago, one of my colleagues. Jason, she knows what's going on. She's got it. It's just always great to hear from Courtney and to see what she's doing. I know this is early, but do you have predictions?
I mean, how can you not have predictions at this
All
point?
right.
Everything's going on right now. Number one, Cubs missed the playoffs. Like, we got to stop with this whole season's still alive, all this. I know that they're only 3.5 games back at the time of us recording this, but they're out. There's no way they catch Atlanta. Atlanta's hot at the right time. They have better pitching, better bats, better bullpen. I'm sorry, guys. No postseason baseball at Wrigley Field this year. That's prediction number one. Prediction number two, I was so impressed with what I saw this weekend from not only the Texas Longhorns, but from the University of Illinois Fighting Illini. They beat a ranked Kansas team at home, the first sellout at Illinois' Memorial Stadium since 2016. I think that this Fighting Illini team is special. Brett Bielema finally has his recruiting classes playing in games because he's been there for 3-4 years now. And so I'm just going to go out on a limb and say Illinois, once they are ranked this season, they will remain ranked for the rest of the season. The consensus right now is that if they beat Central Michigan on Saturday, they will end up being ranked. And I don't think Illinois makes a playoff. The Big Ten's a little too deep. But I am so in on that team after what I saw against Kansas on Saturday. I think that once they're ranked after this week, they're going to spend the next 13 weeks or however much longer we'd have left in the season. Can't keep track this early. I think that they'll spend the rest of it ranked. Love that team. Last prediction for me, I'm going to keep it in college football. I'm going to keep it in the state of Illinois. Quite possibly the biggest upset in college football history happened this past weekend with NIU beating Notre Dame at home. I don't really understand why people aren't advertising it as that more. I mean, ND just beat Texas A&M at Kyle Field week 1 prime time, and then they go to South Bend and they lose to NIU. I am so in on this Huskies team. They're ranked now. They're ranked 25th. They have one more difficult game on the schedule. I can't remember who they play right now, but they play one more. I think it's NC State who they play. They play an ACC opponent on the road. Even if they lose that game, if they win out the rest of the way, that's a playoff team in DeKalb, Illinois, with the way that the new playoff works and the auto bid for the highest ranking Group of 5 champion. It's going to be hard to rank a Group of 5 champion higher than the NIU Huskies if they go undefeated or even with one loss after this point, because no Group of 5 team can possibly have the resume win of a road win against 5th-ranked Notre Dame. It's just not going to happen. So not only do we have a good Illinois team, an okay Northwestern team with a really cool home environment on the lake that we can talk about another time, but the best football team in Illinois might be the NIU Huskies. Mom, it's a beautiful time to be a college
I'm so glad you brought them up. I'm so glad you brought them up.
So my prediction is that they make the playoff. I'm sorry, I forgot to attach a prediction on there. My prediction is that NIU makes the playoff. I mean, I know it's kind of easy to hop on the bandwagon after the big win, and I would have loved to have called this before, but they're hot, and Tario Brown is one of the best running backs in the country. I love what Thomas Hammock has built at NIU, and they have a good senior quarterback in Ethan Hampson. I really think that this Huskies team has at least 10 more wins than them after what they pulled off in South Bend on Saturday.
I love it. It was a great opening week of football. Congratulations also to your Texas Longhorns putting a little spanking on the Wolverines. This is fun, Jason. Let's wrap this up here. And I don't have any final thoughts. I am full blown in football mode for the Bears. We just want to remind everyone to please, if you are a Bears fan and you want to check out the Bears postgame show on ESPN Chicago after every game. We carry every game. We have coverage morning until night. It's also on the ESPN Chicago app. And we are part of the Chicago Bears radio network. So please also follow us here on YouTube. Follow us on the audio. You can listen to us not only on Apple Podcasts, but really wherever you get your audio, and the ESPN Chicago app as well. And Jason, if people like us, what should they do?
Like, rate, subscribe. All 3 of those things really helps us out. Doesn't matter where you do it, YouTube or ESPN Chicago are the 2 best places. But as my mom said, wherever you get your audio, you can get our show. Mom, it's been fun doing this each week with the anticipation and the hype of the Bears season. Let's hope that they keep living up to it. But I'm down to keep recording as many shows as possible. This has been a blast, and it will continue to be a blast. Hope you stay well as always. Hope the next time we talk, we'll be talking about the 2-0 Chicago Bears. Only time will tell. Sunday Night Football against the Texans.
Sunday Night Football against the Texans. Tune in. We will be back soon with another edition of the podcast. And thank you all for joining us. And thank you to everyone back at the station. Thank you to Jack McGrath, who helps us produce as well. Jason, make it a good week, buddy, okay?
Got a big week here. K-State hosting the inaugural Fox Friday football kickoff this Friday, hosting Arizona. Biggest non-conference matchup on the campus.
Nice.
And then I get to watch it for the Bears game on Sunday night. Let's go!
All right. Take care, everyone. So long.